Welcome everyone to the Agriculture and Food panel. Before we start, I wanted to mention that we have a workshop on Friday on our work on farm beats and digital agriculture. In that 3 hour workshop, we will give talks and demos on the technologies that we are building for agriculture and food. Today, I wanted to welcome you to this exciting panel. We will be talking about the future of food and the role of technology in enabling that future of food. Joining me are three leaders, three people who we partner with very closely and who are shaping the future of food, all the way from seeds to crops, working with farmers, with broadacre farmers, with dairy farmers, to food production. Professor Susan McCouch is the professor of plant breeding and genetics, plant biology, biological statistics, and computational biology at Cornell University. She is also a National Academies member and has won several awards for her pioneering work. Teddy Bekele is the Chief Technology Officer at Land O'Lakes, where he leads Land O'Lakes AgTech and IT organizations. He also chairs the Precision Ag Task Force across the USDA and FCC. And Dr. Brabander is SVP at PepsiCo and leads the global R&D functions, including food safety, quality, external innovation, strategy and portfolio management, nutrition science, sensory and regulatory affairs teams. She also serves on the board. She's also a board member at the New York Academy of Sciences. All three panelists have won several awards, serve on multiple high-profile committees, and have done a lot of work in agriculture and food. I'm really excited to hear their views on the questions that we'll ask in today's panel. So let's start with the first question. We know that we need to grow more food, more nutritious food, to feed the growing population of the world. All of you work in different aspects of the food chain. So what is your vision for the future of agriculture and food? In the future, how will food be grown? The seeds, the supply chain, the manufacture of food, how will they all change to help us address the world's food problem? So we could start with you, Susan.
My vision is really that the future of food is a much more diverse landscape of both how plants are grown, what is grown, which crops are grown, how we feed animals, how we feed humans, and who grows food. So currently we have a very large array of food systems in the world. About 70% of the food that people eat on the planet is produced on small farms, mostly in the developing world, with myriad small farmers trying to eke out a living and feed populations that are largely local. I think we went in the 60s towards a one-size-fits-all, where we tried to create an agricultural system that was highly efficient and productive. But in doing so, we narrowed the genetic base, we narrowed the number of people who farm, and we narrowed the species composition of our diets, leading to many of the problems we see today. So my vision for the future is a technology-enabled diversification of who farms, what we farm, how we farm, and where we farm food.
I love that vision, Ellen. So Teddy, do you want to go next?
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you. So to begin with, I just a quick couple of seconds on Land O'Lakes, right? So Land O'Lakes, farm to fork, farmer-owned cooperative. So we start by selling seed and crop protection to ag retailers that sell them to farmers. That grain that comes off that field is used as an ingredient for our animal nutrition business, where we feed a number of species, some in rural communities, some in urban. And then if those animals we feed are cows, obviously they ingest the food and then they produce milk, and then that milk is used to produce butter and cheese that you find at the grocery store. So you sort of have that continuum. So when you look at the future for us, is we get to see all aspects of the supply chain, right? And it's how do we make that supply chain more transparent? Traceability is ultimately where we want to be, but at least the transparency. Can we see it? Can we optimize the supply chain? Can we optimize the decisions farmers make up front when they are planting seeds? And today a lot of that work is manual. There's 40 major decisions farmers have to make, with 180 decisions that are sub decisions on top of that. And a lot of that is art today and less science. So can we use technology to enable that decision making so they're making the right choices for what Susan talked about, right? Having a more dynamic, having more biodiverse crops, right, planted into the ground so they could be more flexible. But at the same time being environmentally sustainable, because they do care about that but they have to know the impact of the decisions they're making at the time in which they're making those decisions. And finally, the vision is really to look at, the disruptions that are coming, whether it's climate variability, whether it's fluctuations in commodity prices, or whether it's changing consumer demands. How can the supply chain become more resilient, but at the same time very flexible to adapt to these, drastic changes that are happening on a regular basis? So if we can manage that in a more automated fashion, in a more intelligent fashion, then I think we have what the future of food looks like.
Wonderful. Thank you, Teddy. And Ellen, your views?
Well, it's difficult to add anything more. I think you captured it very well, both Susan and Teddy. But I think we all know the food sector is at the center of major global challenges. And these challenges, they really need urgent action. And whether it is about feeding a growing population or actually make sure that it is about more nutrition and less empty calories. Clearly, food sector plays a major role in the climate change that we see. So I think that's something where we all agree about. PepsiCo is a leading player in the food and beverage industry. It's actually also a company, a leading agri company. And so all of our raw materials are agro crops, and we support over 100,000 jobs in the agro world. So the agro part is equally important for us as well as the food manufacturing part. Indeed, as we know in the past, the practices were very much focused on let's optimize yields and the economics, and indeed that did result in more monocultures and a one size fits all, and it also did result in practices that are not sustainable. So it's very clear we need to transform the way we produce food in order to feed the world in a sustainable way. I think everyone agrees there. So new practices are needed to not only grow the crops and the animals, but also to manufacture food at scale, to ensure that we have a resilient supply chain, more local supply chain. And let's not forget, food is about great taste as well. So deliver great tasting products that people actually enjoy eating. And one of the things we also will see that it will be less a one size fits all, not only less a one size fits all of the crops, but also of the products. So much more targeted per cohort, per region, per event. And all of that does actually trigger more complexity. Less one size fits all also translates in more complexity. And more complexity also induces more cost and more failures. So that's why urgently new ways of working are needed to address that. It's one thing to have a clear vision. It's another thing to have a solution to get there.
Yeah, wonderful. I love the vision, and the vision all the way from a diversification, technology-driven diversification that Susan you talked about, to Teddy, your idea of transparent supply chain and automating a lot of tasks from art to something which is technology driven, all the way to how food is actually manufactured. So I love the vision that you just painted. It is ambitious. It needs multiple researchers across different disciplines to come together to achieve these breakthroughs. And in this session, in our audience, we have people from different disciplines. These are computer scientists, and many of them are computer scientists across different areas of computer science who are listening to you today. How do you think technologies such as cloud, artificial intelligence, edge compute, robotics, all of that can help us achieve the vision that you just laid out? And we could go in the same order. Susan?
Sure. I'm convinced that one of the main roles of technology, at least currently, is to understand complexity and manage complexity in a way that a single individual can't do. But an individual who's assisted by enough data and analytics that the decisions that one has to make are informed decisions. So I think a lot of what we learn over the course of our lifetimes is managed in some sense simply by our experience. And what we're aiming for with tech is to get a broader array of data inputs to be able to make better decisions and to be able, in some ways, to understand the natural world much more profoundly and mimic the complexity that the natural world throws at us instead of trying to dominate it and channel it and simplify it. the tech revolution gives us the potential to collectively understand that complexity, try to mimic it in a way that's sustainable for the long term, understand our role in the midst of other natural systems on the planet, and let's just say change the behavior, as Ellen said. I mean, the dramatic changes that are going to be needed not only in agriculture and food production, but in the way we move, the way we communicate. These are all tech assisted. And so I am very hopeful that what we're doing is essentially enlarging our ability to work collectively through a technology revolution that gives us what we like to call in my area of work, the Internet of living things. In other words, using tech to understand life and to understand the complexity of living systems and work with them.
I love the term, the Internet of living things. It's like the digital twins, but digital twins which also capture the living things around us, and in this case, plants and soil microbes. And I can just imagine and that complexity and how AI and all of these technologies can help us understand that. Wonderful. Teddy?
Yeah, I love what Susan meant, especially the Internet of Living Things. But even, and I'll just build upon that and give some examples of exactly the things that she's mentioning, but that I see in our world, right? So when we talk about optimal decision making, when we talked about automation, transparency, all these things have tech at the core of that, right? So you start with optimal decision making. Like I said earlier, a farmer has to make 40 decisions, like what type of seed am I going to plant into the ground? Well, even what type of crop I'm going to plant into the ground. But then you get to the soil aspect that you mentioned, right? The soil itself is not the same at any parts of the field. It changes, so I have to understand that. So do I put more seeds in one area versus another? Do I actually change the type of seed that I use in those areas? What day should I plant, right? Knowing the forecast of the weather and what's going to happen and the irrigation system that I have, what's the most optimal time? And then how do I care for that plant as it comes out of the ground, right? So all these decisions are there. Today, it's more of an art form than it is science. So if we could use machine learning to be able to help with those types of decisions, that makes a huge difference. Now you look at that crop coming out of the ground, one of the things you can do, especially on row crops, is be there to spoon feed it, right? So you have to know what's going on at any given time. That's when things like edge computing become interesting, right? What kind of devices can we put out there that give us real-time information, but then don't require as much attention from a standpoint of it broke, and it has to be fixed, or something went wrong and somebody has to go find the device itself. All those types of things become interesting, right? When you look at even further down the supply chain from a production standpoint, that's when things like computer vision become interesting. Instead of having human inspection with eyes, especially on the produce side, could you have computer vision help with those types of problems, right? And then not only say there's a problem, but what type of problem is it? Is it a batch? Is it an individual unit? And how do you adjust for those things, to become more dynamic, right, in the supply chain itself? So I think those are really interesting pieces. But then if you go even look further out, one of the things Ellen mentioned is nutritious food, right? That's not just empty. And when you look at that area, now you get into more, not necessarily precision agriculture or precision medicine, but you get into precision nutrition, right? What do individuals actually need for their own bodies? And then, depending on that, how do you then backtrack back into the supply chain and say, well, how can we become dynamic and serve the things we need further, right? And that now you're getting into things that are a lot more complex, into quantum computing and things of that nature, and even blockchain to a certain extent to be able to do some of that traceability. So there's lots of opportunities, right? I feel like we're just scratching the surface at the moment, but lots of opportunities to go really wide and lots of big problems to solve.
Well, thank you, Teddy. And Ellen?
Yeah, great, Teddy and Susan. So let me build upon that. So I think we all agree each of the steps will really be transformed by using the new digital technologies. Whether you talk about growing crops or manufacturing food at scales, and even the building new supply chains and delivering great tasting products. Let me focus a little bit on the world that I'm most familiar with in PepsiCo. And clearly, if you take a step back, what you see is that we have actually complex way of working. Not only in our company, but also in other large organizations, complex ways of working to deliver, the kind of one size fits all, relatively simple portfolio. And what we will move towards is that you say we should have much more simplified, harmonized, digitalized ways of working to enable to deliver a complex portfolio, much more customized, less one size fits all portfolio. So more complex portfolio, but that can only be realized if we are able to harmonize and digitize and optimize and simplify the way that we get there. And if I just focus on my area in R&D, clearly we are focused on innovation. Innovation in food is important and will remain important. And not too many people will realize that the current process, even if we talk about a minor innovation like a new flavor of a beverage, it is actually a complex process. It is very much based on testing, physical testing, generating data, multiple iterations, very much based on SME. And we would like to move to a much more data-driven way with less physical testing, where you can predict on the screen, based on the data that you see, you understand the consumer insight, you understand, the flavor, you can design the formula, you can already design the process and optimize it, you can design the package, you can ensure compliance. Each of those steps right now require a lot of handling and testing, and that is what the vision is, to really simplify it by leveraging data and systems in the future. And that is where we can absolutely make an enormous breakthrough.
Yeah, and to add to what you were saying, Ellen, just to elaborate, you said SME, for people who don't know, that subject matter expert.
Specialist,
Yeah, and in this case, a lot of people discover new types of sensors. We have done a great job inventing sensors for seeing, for your camera, or speaking, like your microphone. But what you're talking of is the sensor for taste, the sensor for smell. And what would that look like, and how would you automate that? It's a fascinating problem, and yeah, I'm sure people looking here would love to think more about how that would feed in to the manufacturing of new ingredients. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, Ranveer. Maybe to add that part, it's still, of course, you try to design a product that consumers like. But if you then want to say, okay, what is it that people like, and can we copy it? Somehow that is still a very descriptive manual process. So if you could codify that, just like you can codify color, like you can codify sound. Can you design it and already predict what consumers will like? Certain consumers will like in certain. That process is ready to be transformed if the technology is developed here.
Yeah, that's a hard technology problem. Yeah, Susan.
I was just going to riff on that a little bit. I think that it's really important to link what Ellen's saying and what Teddy said with the concept of flavor, basic molecules that food provides, and then health needs and health responses to those flavors, compounds, and nutritional metabolites. Because the thing that one person likes, another person doesn't like strongly, often for genetic reasons, right? Like Brussels sprouts are sweet to some and bitter to others. Or there are a number of these sorts of flavor compounds that are attractive to people in one culture and not another. And then there's the culinary. So I love the idea that we're talking about understanding better at all levels, across scales. What is food? It's a cultural phenomenon, but it's also a biomolecular phenomenon, and it's a health promoting or sometimes a health deteriorating situation, and it's different for each person. So the linkages across all of these innovative frontiers in ag and food open up many interesting new domains for us to think about our own health. And therefore, agriculture and health start to link. And I like to talk about the One Health movement, because I think it truly is the health of the agricultural system, the health of the plants and animals and the microbes that comprise that system. That leads to the health of the human population. And if we manage it well, it'll lead to the health of the planet in a way that allows us to think about ourselves as part of that larger system. And the frontiers that make people excited about food are often in that flavor, taste, and then health continuum, that spectrum, not on the production side. Most people are not involved in that thought process on the production side. And here we are talking about how to bring all of those together.
Yeah, and it's just fascinating. And as a computer scientist, I just keep thinking about the complexity and how do you bring both the production side, that's the farm, and the manufacturing of it, and the R&D behind it, and automating all of it. You all are the experts, but if we can provide you with the data, with the sensors, with AI, I'm sure you could use those tools to come up with brand new inventions on how do you provide personalized nutrition, which is also healthy and tastes good.
Yeah,
I think that would
there's
be,
no better enjoyable
yeah.
food than food that tastes good that can be used as medicine, right?
Yeah, that would be perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah,
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 and let's not forget, we are actually talking about relatively low-cost products. So you are not, it's not about designing a car or whatever. And we are talking about products, food, with a limited shelf life. And it must be, and so there are a number of constraints that still need to be met in order to bring this vision to life. Yeah.
yeah, wonderful. Before we move on to the next question, Teddy, I just wanted you to talk a little bit about one aspect which is close to my heart and also yours, connectivity in the farm. That is, a lot of the computer science folks or electrical engineering people in the audience, they work on networking. So just a little bit on, because that is another if you could connect farms, if you could connect farmers, and the role of that in the future, in the vision that you had laid out on a connected supply
Yeah,
chain.
absolutely. And connectivity, I mean, it goes from the basic connectivity to the most complex, right? So the basic being just having access to internet on the farm, right? So in the house, I'm not even talking about the field, but just the household. And that's an imperative. That's why I'm on that Precision Ag Connectivity Task Force. And the major thing being, can we actually get some sort of broadband connectivity to the farm itself, right? So, and that's not easy, right? Because I mean, rural communities are spread apart. One house is miles away from the next one, right? And you have to dig if you're going to do fiber, and it's quite expensive. You can look at fixed wireless type of a solution. So that's step one. You got to have that basic connectivity. Now you got connectivity at the farm. Now you got to think about the fields that surround that farm, which will also be in the next county, by the way, right? Because that's how spread out it is. So now you're looking at things that are more fixed wireless type of a thing. Can you put some sort of an antenna on top of a grain silo and then project the signal in that fashion, that whether you're in an equipment that is driving around the field or whether you're using some sort of a tablet or a device standing in the middle of the field, you can do that type of analysis. But when you go even low bandwidth type stuff, so like the edge pieces that we're talking about, the IoT sensors that go into the field, they could use sort of lower spectrum type of connectivity to be able to create that mesh. But now when you have that, now you have more visibility and the whole farm lights up in that fashion. So that becomes super important as well. And there's lots of work that we're doing together with Microsoft Airband to enable some of these retailers that are in these rural communities to put these towers on top of the silos and top of the fertilizer plants, and then sort of light up the community that way. So that basic connectivity is needed that way. Once you have that, things to light up. And then beyond that, what we get into is now different solution providers, whether it's the equipment providers, whether it's the retailers that provide crop inputs, whether it's those who buy the grain back from the farmers at the end of the day. Now they need to be able to talk to one another, right? And I know, Ranveer, you and I are working on the Farm Beat solution, the Azure Farm Beat solution, that really kind of create that ecosystem, right, where you have connectivity becomes a lot simpler, and you don't have to do point-to-point solutions or have some convoluted way to be able to pass data. But now, but again, we're still at the very surface of this, and more connectivity is needed. Once all that comes together, then everything else we're talking about here, it really opens up the runway to make that a reality.
Yeah, no, I love this topic, and as you can tell, it's close to my heart too. And I think this is we all are doing and this is something that we need to address. We need to get farms connected, farmers connected, and that leads us to the next problem. That is the next question, which is on the role of the farmer. Whenever we think of the food, we think of the farmer that grew the food, be it a broadacre farmer, the livestock farmer, the fisheries farmer, or a smallholder farmer in South Asia or Sub-Saharan Africa. And we are hearing about a lot of changes around alt protein, consumer demand for sustainability and traceability. What do you think is the role of the farmer in the future? If we project out to 2030 and 2050, what is the farmer going to look like? And as scientists, what should people be thinking about empowering the people who will be growing our food? So we could go in the reverse order in this one. So, Ellen, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think the future is actually bright for the farmer. So right now it may be a difficult area, and not too many people are interested in joining becoming a farmer. I think in the future it will be difficult, and I hope actually that is true. So it's about growing different crops, doing it in a different way, with more differentiated crops, so that will provide a better income in a more sustainable way. Far less physical work in the farm, so much more digitally enabled. So attractive place to work in. It will also allow the sector to attract better and new talent. That usually in a time of transformation, that is a positive upside there. So I expect more funding to flow in that area, and really the role will be much more different. So it will be almost a desk worker with all the data coming in. There's still work to be done outside, but far that physical dimension will be far less. So actually, I'm quite optimistic there, because let's not forget the world needs to continue to be fed, but in a different way with different.
That's very interesting, Ellen. Just to add a little bit more, what's your view on the smallholder farmers? So PepsiCo is doing a lot of work with smallholder farmers as well. So do you think they will continue to be small? That would expand because there are like over 500 million of these smallholder farmers worldwide. I like your vision about how they will become more digitally equipped, more digitally savvy with all the data. Is this something you think would permeate to the smallholder farmers as well?
Yeah, you can expect more local supply chains, and also more differentiated crops. But in the end, the other side is we still need to feed a growing population. So you cannot get there with only with small. So it's not a one size fits all, but I think almost everyone will be impacted by these growing new technologies. So that is what you can see, even if you are a small farmer focusing on more premium type of products.
Thank you, Ellen. Teddy?
Yeah, so I think I'm in the same camp as Ellen, right? I think the future is bright for farmers, and the two pieces I'll build upon. I mean, one is farmers are the ultimate entrepreneur, right? I mean, they are every year making decisions that when you bet the farm. I mean, literally in farming, that's true, right? So you might not be there the next year just because you've made some bad decisions, but they do that. I mean, they take those risks and they take those chances every year. So I think this idea that they've optimized the way they do things today. And when I speak a lot about row crop farmers because that's what I deal with. But it's true to those who do specialty crops, smallholder farmers across the world. That same trait applies, right? I mean, you are always looking for different way to differentiate, to change your practice. You become good at something, but something else is on the horizon and you'll have to flip again, right? I mean, and that's been common for them. So that's one. The second piece, they're the ultimate environmentalist. I mean, the farmers, 95% of farmers, at least in the United States, are still family. It's a family affair, right? And so you get the farm from, those, before you, and you want to leave it in a better condition than you found it. I mean, that's kind of ingrained in their DNA. So the last thing they want to do is make a mess of it. So they're always looking to be more sustainable, but at the same time, they have to be profitable, at least to make it to the next year, so you can have the gamble for the following year, right? Otherwise you won't be there. And that's the end of that whole family affair that I talked about a second ago. So I think, what technology can do for farmers is help in both of those areas. I think they can help them be more resilient. As Ellen said, with automation, take some of that manual work away. Because, that's getting in the way of making better decisions, having to do more analysis, right? And educating themselves on what are some of the newer practices because they're too burdened with doing the work itself on a day-to-day basis. So I think, that's kind of the future is as more automation comes, you'll have more time to be able to dedicate to, kind of thinking about what you should do. The other exciting part is there's a lot of other people now that are not in farming that can be involved in farming once the tech space opens up, because you could have folks that have never farmed before, but know about software development, right? Know about putting these ecosystems together. helping advise the farmer on what are some of the better decisions and why it could be this way. And that interaction starts to happen. So you can have somebody who was born in urban, has no contact whatsoever with a rural area, but now is heavily participating or actively participating in making those decisions. And I think that's exciting. And ultimately, what I would love to see, right, and this is kind of a challenge for the audience, is can we actually move innovation to rural communities, right? And what I mean is, can we bring Silicon Valley into rural community, right? Because there's lots of fun things to try. And that will make the community also more vibrant, more exciting. And a lot of folks may even think about relocating back to rural communities if connectivity and all those kind of the basic things are there. But if you think about, even if you talk about things like self-driving cars, there's no better place to try self-driving anything but in a rural community where there's not a whole lot to hit, right? Like, and you can experiment with a lot of different things. You can experiment with a lot of different technology. So that would be exciting to see if the farm, innovation of the future actually could move to, into a different area.
I love this, where Ellen started with the digital farmer. You're talking about a vibrant rural community as well, which is you drive a lot of entrepreneurship and innovation in rural communities. Susan, your views on this?
I think we're going to see a lot of different types of farmers and the emergence of the connectivity that allows people to think about even urban farms. I mean, controlled environment agriculture is on the rise. The price of food coming out of certain areas and certain types of farming systems will be higher, but the traceability will also be higher, and probably some of the inputs will be better understood. So we're in a transitional phase, and I think it does open up a lot of opportunity for people who've not found it attractive. I'm just mimicking what Ellen said. But to build on Teddy's point, I also think that many of the rural areas are looking for opportunities to do what they know how to do very well, which is to manage land resources. And they will do so in accordance with both their entrepreneurial spirit and government policy. So if governments around the world start to try to enforce things like carbon trading, I already see in my area here, farmers are jumping on that because they are the ones that can make some changes right now that would increase incomes, contribute, I think, positively to try to arrest some of the dramatic climate changes we're seeing. And they're willing and open to those changes as long as Teddy said, as that allows them to maintain their fundamental way of life as somebody who cares for, nurtures, and sustains the land and the base of productivity that it represents. So I think we're going to see a lot more small holders, as you said, in South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa, who can actually hopefully connect to markets, find specialized markets or optimize local markets. And in response to changing demand, I believe farmers are very well equipped to make changes to their production practices as long as there is strong policy support and the information is distributed. So now I'm back to my tech point. I think when information is either all in a few hands or hoarded in some way with barriers, we have a problem for farmers. And what farmers need is to be brought in on the information revolution that goes with this tech revolution and enabled, if you will, to make decisions. They're good decision makers, but they will need not just information, but let's say they need filtered information that's filtered to enable them to make better decisions. And I think we have to work very closely with the producers, large and small, across the world, each in different market segments. We have very different market segments for field crops than for specialty crops, very different market segments for specialized specialty crops, high-value specialty crops, or row crops. So I'm interested to see where and how the farmer of the future engages and both, accepts and builds on these opportunities and also puts up some resistance and starts to tell us what they think will work in their operation. And it's got to be a two-way street. We've got to both, I think, have hope for this new opportunity, but we have to build in the system that will enable people who really want to manage a farm to be full participants. In other words, fully engaged in that, and helping make good decisions is part of it. It isn't a farmer where the farmer just waits to be told what to do or how to do it. I think they really are agents of change. I feel very strongly that we need to invest in the farmers of today, and enable them to help us move to the future that we envision.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Susan. Thank you, Teddy. And thank you, Ellen. This has been such a fascinating discussion. We are unfortunately at the end of time, but we could keep talking on this, such an important topic. We learned about interesting viewpoints on the future of food, how technology can help, and the role of the farmer of the future from an academic viewpoint, that of the largest farmer-owned cooperative and one of the leading food and beverage manufacturer, and each individual themselves are leaders in this space. Thank you so much. As you can tell, this is an important topic. We need to work on this because it affects the way we eat, our health, and also because it affects our planet. So to everyone in the audience, hope you will join us in our journey to help address one of the world's most challenging problems of sustainably nourishing the world. Thank you.